Hi everyone, this is Panos from PNOE. I'm excited today to be talking with Jills, one of our esteemed affiliates located in Canada, a professional in training all kinds of athletes, people looking to live longer, looking to lose weight, and one of his specialties is breathing training. And today he's going to be discussing a success story of one of his clients, who's Ian, joining us today as well. Ian has been working with Jill for quite some time, training for specific athletic events. He's going to share more with us on what his goals have been. First of all, thank you both for joining me here today. Um, we're very excited to hear about Jill's training and also Ian's story and how he put all of Jill's recommendations into practice and saw tremendous improvements in the way he breathes. So, Jill's, I let you take it from here. You can share with us a little bit about yourself and then the kind of work that you do, and then we go to Ian.
Thank you very much, Panos, for having us. I do metabolic testing. So I use metabolic testing to get more data for my clients to be able to breathe better and to be able to push themselves a little further and to people with anything with asthmatic or COPD or any lung deficiencies. The data that I get from PNOE is incredible. From ventilation to carbon dioxide to the oxygen to, it's basically lets me pinpoint exactly what zone that I need to work on. And we're going to show you a little while later on what we did with Ian and where we need to go in the future. So really, it's what I do is I specialize in the respiratory programming and using metabolic testing as a major tool for my program.
Awesome. Cool. And Ian is one of your success stories. Ian, we're very happy to have you here. If you can share a little bit about yourself and the kind of training you're doing and the objectives that you have in mind, which I believe were the motivation behind you working with Jills.
Yeah, I got into athletics kind of late in life. I started in my 30s doing road cycling for a bit. And then the road cycling scene kind of dried up. So I thought I would start to run. And at which point I realized how quickly cycling and running are not the same thing. And how I had to start from scratch. Like you don't just jump off the bike and start running real fast.
It's a very different.
Yeah. So I started running a little bit. I'd run a few days a week. I'd get injured. I'd run a little bit. I met up with some people in town and got introduced to blood lactate testing. So I fairly early in my running career, late 30s, learned about heart rate, which was kind of interesting. And that really helped help me build a training plan that helped keep me moderately injury free for a while. But after a bit, you just kind of sort of tap out and you plateau off and you keep training, but you're getting older and you think that's it. You've reached the mountaintop and now you're going to be coming down the other side. I then got doing a little bit of canicross, which is where I met Gilles. That's when you run with a dog attached to you. So it's basically like a sled dog sport, only you're the sled. So in Moncton, I did the canicross event there, and I met Gilles at another canicross event, and we were chatting. So I got in and got tested, and a great recommendation from another canicross racer, Sarah, who was also working with Gilles. So it seemed like an ideal thing to jump in there and see what was going on, and did the first test with him. And I'll say that the potential that he was talking about, based on and what I already had, my lung capacity and the potential I could get to, that kind of sparked an interest again to sort of, find the new peak of the mountain and keep going up there. This year I turned 49, but after working with Gilles for just like 6-7 weeks last year, I just managed to eke out a little bit more. So I've run my fastest 5 and 10K last year at age 48. I'm only, without specifically training for those, again, I'm already getting to that level of fitness as I sort of ramp through the summer up for fall racing season again. So I'm ahead of where I was this time last year. So the potential is there. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. That's a great story. Thank you for sharing. Just wanted to ask you, did you have any prior knowledge of metabolic testing, VO2 max testing, the kind of insights that this test produces, and any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I knew of like VO2 max testing, like the big mask, the big tubes coming everywhere,
Yeah.
14 scientists surrounding you with clipboards.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that the blood lactate testing seemed like great because it was one guy and a treadmill, and it seemed very approachable. The cost wasn't exorbitant. So it was a great experience. I didn't think that something like VO2 max for a guy in his mid to late 40s was going to be worth the effort of going through the cost, the effort. Probably have to go find a facility somewhere that does it. So it just seemed a little overwhelming for what I needed.
Totally. And I'm guessing you got introduced to Jill's, and then he brought up metabolic testing. Jill's, is that right? Is this how it went down? Perhaps you can now take us through the process that you followed with Ian, the testing you did, what type of limitations you were able to identify, and just the training that you prescribed based on that.
Well, when I seen the canine cross, I saw how fast Ian was going. I was like, there's no way my legs could go that fast because you're propelling so fast. So I got interested quite a bit about the sport, and I was like, how fast do you run without a dog? And I realized how fast of a runner he was without the dog. And so we did so we finally got him from Halifax into Moncton to do the testing. And I thought, because I knew his speed was under 20 minutes for a 5K, and we know that's fast.
Yeah, that's very fast.
And he goes into the 17 minutes for 5 kilometers, right? 3.1 miles. So I knew he was fast. It was going to be fun to see. Oh man, this guy's going to be breathing really good. I was really excited to see that. And then when I seen him breathe, I was like, oh my gosh. And you're almost 49 years old. You're almost 50, and we can improve you. No matter what, I was like, even if it doesn't improve your speed, at least you won't be so exhausted afterwards. You'll have way more energy. You'll be able to recoup faster, and maybe less injuries. I knew it was going to do something for him, so I was pretty excited. I knew something was going to change in Ian. Yeah.
And since you're, we're going a little bit into the identification of the insights, let me just share my screen and show people what Ian's initial test looked like. Awesome. So this is Ian's initial test conducted back in August of 2022. Here we can see the main graph in the PNOE platform, where you see VO2 and VCO2 expressed in milliliters per minute over kilogram of body weight. We can see that Ian's VO2 peak ranges between 62 and 64. So he's around a 63, which is obviously very high as expected for a person who can do a sub 20-minute 5K run. Now, I'm going to switch these variables into the respiratory variables that Jill's talked about. So I'm going to cross out VO2, VCO2, and I'm going to bring up VT, which is the green line, and breathing frequency, which is the purple line. Now here, just to do a little bit of explanation of the things that Jill's talked about, you can see that this person is, even from the get-go of the test, so initial stages of the RAM test, breathing at more than 30 breaths per minute. And then at peak, he goes all the way up to 60. Because of the high breathing frequency, obviously his lungs are not able to expand and contract sufficiently. And so the tidal volumes, in other words, VT, the green line, is significantly reduced for an athlete of that capability. Now, this is, Jill, something that you typically come across. Can you talk us a little bit about the frequency of coming across such people?
Well, I've never seen someone being able to run, to be honest, run that fast with
True,
such
true.
bad
Indeed, this is unique.
frequency.
Like
Yeah,
we typically see people that have that sort of limitation,
yeah.
but you don't expect that these people will be able to run.
No,
Uh,
no,
a,
not that count. And you can tell as soon as he breathes less, you can see that he's getting a little bit more diaphragm, a little bit deeper into his lungs. I mean, you
Mhm.
can see the wavy lines when he breathes
Yeah,
deep, the
yeah.
frequency goes down.
Mhm,
And so right away, I
mhm,
knew that there's potential to
mhm.
to just teach him how to breathe
Yeah,
deeper into his
yeah.
lungs, to
Mhm,
not like constantly just
mhm,
breathing with the upper
mhm,
lobes of your lungs when you got a lot more
mhm,
blood flow at the bottom of your lungs. So I knew
mhm.
right away when he was doing the test. I knew right away. I was like, wow, I know what I need to teach him. We need to teach him
Awesome.
how to just breathe deeper. When you breathe deeper, we're going to
Mhm.
teach him some coordination issues. Is what
That's
we're going
awesome.
to.
And Jules, can you talk a little bit more about the type of training you prescribe based on the problem that you found?
Well, right away, I wanted to. It wasn't just a one section of the test, so I had to go through zone, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And because of his breathing depth, I always go depends on the frequency that I'm going to use. For let's say
Hmm.
a zone 2, I'll go from a 20 breathing frequency up to about a 28 breathing
Hmm.
frequency. And
Hmm.
since he was breathing so fast, I
Hmm.
didn't want to make a dramatic change and get him to practice at a 20 times per minute. So I was like, well, I'm going to start practicing right around the middle, the 25 times a
Hmm.
minute in his zone 2. And that would actually tell me, I said, when you're actually, I had a breathe way better device for him to use. And I said,
Hmm.
when you're breathing, focus that your heart rate is about 130 and you're running right now. You're in your zone 2, you're burning fat as your major source of fuel.
Hmm.
And you're going to be 25 times, and you're going to go to, as soon as you feel that it's tight, that's what we're going to practice. So I
Hmm.
don't want you to go to exaggerate it at 110%, but I want you to go to 90% where it's tight, and we're going to practice at that level. So we did 25 times a minute there. And then I would go to 30 times a minute, 35 and 40. And I don't even know if we went even to a 45. Did we, Ian?
Yeah, we
We
hit a
did.
45.
Okay, so 45 because he went up to a 60
Yeah.
frequency. So I wanted them, hey, can we get you down to like a 45 so that he's very comfortable and that his thoracic spine is in place, and he's not going to get injured, that he's got
Hmm.
full breath in.
Hmm.
So I think that's as far as we went. Did we even go to a 50? I don't think so, but might have.
I don't think in the main
Yeah,
training.
Hmm.
I
yeah,
mean, I did for fun, but
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And so and that's what we wanted to do. He has such big lungs, right? You got to remember his FEV1, which is that 1 second power, is 5.5 liters, right? And he's
Dang,
not a big tall
that's a lot.
man,
Yeah.
and,
And,
and he's
and
a
and this is
slim.
important you're bringing this up just for people to understand what we're talking about here better. So Jill just said that this person's FEV1, which is the amount of air that you breathe out when you're exhaling in full force in the first second, so
Mm-hmm,
that is 5.1 liters.
mm-hmm.
And what we see here is
He's
that
below. He's
he
like
is,
below 55% all the time.
yeah, he's
Mm-hmm,
constantly using such a low fraction, less than 50% of that.
Mhm.
in the areas here that you're supposed to be working for most of the time when you're exercising and when you're doing endurance work, right? So basically, Ian wasn't using a significant chunk of his lungs for most of the work that he was doing. And Jill's prescription, just to summarize things for our listeners, was to, okay, break the exercise spectrum of Ian into zones. We do that as part of the report that we provide. And then for every zone, Jill's prescribed specific breathing frequency, so that Ian can train his system
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
operate at that specific frequency when training at each respective training zone.
And when they're doing the frequency,
Hmm.
I'm also putting in their heads, like the if you ever see a bobsledder at the
Hmm.
top of the hill, and he's
Hmm.
going through mentally through all the curves.
Hmm.
I do the same thing with all my athletes and people,
Hmm.
that, okay, when you're practicing 25, I want you to pretend you're doing a nice zone 2 training where you could actually have a conversation, you could do a full nasal breathing, and that is what I want you to be focusing on, 25
Hmm.
times a minute, or if it's 20, or if it's 28.
Hmm.
So, and the same thing goes, okay, now Ian, we're going to be going for your PR, so we're going to be going, 4, and then you're going to tap into 5 at times. So,
Hmm.
okay, so now we're going, between 35 to 45, let's say, depending on what I get him to do. So I get him to focus that that's what he's doing. So when he goes for his run, that he knows the repetition, because the more repetition we do,
Hmm.
if we get 100 hours of,
Hmm.
uh, you know, basically to become an expert. To me, when I do my exercise, it's like if I can perform
Hmm.
this exercise 10,000 times, I become an expert at it.
Hmm.
And it's the same
Yeah.
thing with breathing, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, there's a very strong neuromuscular component
Mm-hmm.
in breathing. In fact, this neuromuscular component can work in your favor if you actually do the training and you train the system to operate in a specific way. But on the contrary, it can also work against you when you develop these bad, quote unquote, neuromuscular respiratory connections, whereby you teach your muscles to contract and expand in abnormal, quote unquote, patterns, which may be too fast, too shallow, erratic, etc. This is what ends up to what we call in medicine chronic hyperventilation, which is something happening in the background. This neuromuscular connection has been established, and you are breathing in a specific, potentially pathological way without knowing. Now, this you can obviously break, as Jill just explained. It does require some work. Uh, Not tremendously difficult work. It's basically introducing some sort of respiratory breathing in your life. And as we will see now, um, this is Ian's follow up test that took place in April of 2023. And you can see that his VO2 max was slightly elevated. So we're now solidly in 65 and above, which is great. Uh, you know, when you're in your 60s, going from 63 to 65 is a significant improvement. It may not seem big for a lot of people, but it is a significant improvement. But what I want to focus people's attention is what happened to his breathing. Um, so now I am pulling up same variables as before, just so that we compare apples to apples. And again, green line, we're looking at tidal volume. So the amount of air he's exhaling per breathing cycle. And here we have breathing frequency again. First of all, what I would like to focus people's attention on is the fact that we're talking about massive changes. So we went from 30 breaths per minute in the beginning to nicely fluctuating 25 and below.
Yeah.
And in some cases going as low as 15 breaths per minute. By the way, this is what we see, and most people who actually do resting tests. So this is the resting respiratory frequency of people at rest. And then because of the fact that respiratory frequency is so low, Ian is now using a tremendously big chunk of his lungs. He's
Mm.
actually operating at, what's that, 85,
Yeah,
90%,
yeah, he's above 80% at times, or
above
85,
80%.
88%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you're looking at 4.5, almost 5 liters per breathing cycle, which is incredible. Obviously, going down slightly as
Mm.
intensity goes up, but even at the very end,
Yeah, he was
like
at
we're talking about
404.
4 liters
Mm-hmm.
in peak effort.
Mhm.
So, Ian, ball back to you. We discussed the science. We want you to tell us, like, how does that breathing feel, and what kind of impact have you seen in your life?
Well, I'd say after, like, I think I said this to Jill, like, it's like the first few sessions I had, like breathing with the training tool that we have, like you can just feel the constriction, like the inability to really expand your chest out. Like you think you can take a deep breath, but you don't realize how extra hard you have to work at that. After a week or so, like that wasn't, like you could just, it just relaxed. It just allowed me to actually open my chest up, which was great. When I'm running now, certainly I can consciously feel the breathing, and I can control it. Certainly there's always a subconscious amount to how breathing works. But when I can tell when my heart rate is starting to climb a little too high, when I'm pushing the effort, I can ease it back a little bit by controlling my breath a little bit more, particularly running up hills, which is nice because that just leaves me that much fresher at the end of a race. I can push that last 500 meters in a 5K to like a higher speed. So that's great. And then when I'm done a hard effort session, the recovery was never like horrible for me. I had a tendency, like my cardio system has generally been pretty good. I've generally recovered fairly well, but now it's even more significant. Like it's within minutes after I finish a 5K race, it's like, okay, let's go out for another jog. You know, like it's not a big deal. I'm not collapsed on the ground. And frankly, the biggest thing for me right now is it helps me sleep better. And sleep is such a huge key to recovery. I've generally been a fairly poor sleeper since I was a little kid. I wake up.
Any specific reason for that? Like, if you would like to share, like, is it like physiological, psychological?
Well, probably. I mean, I have an incredibly active brain. Not to the point where I require any level of medication. I don't take actually any medication whatsoever. I at one point was tested at a sleep clinic. They said there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah.
But yet I'm the type of person that would traditionally wake up, frequently throughout the night. Now it's just like one of the things I do, even when I get into bed, I do little amounts of like box breathing kind of techniques, and they're just sort of just calm you down. So I mean, a little more control in my breathing, a little more knowledge about breath, and it just, the relaxing times are more relaxing now. I'm not stressed about that sort of stuff. So certainly, I think there's a psychological component as much as there is a physical, but certainly just it's easier to breathe.
Yeah. And what I want to highlight for our listeners is the connection between the way we breathe and the psychosomatic element of our physiology is there. A little bit of science behind that. The neurons of the parasympathetic nervous system typically connect at the bottom of the lungs, versus neurons of the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight system, typically connect in the upper chunk of the lungs. So when someone is engaging the bottom of the lung and is doing deep diaphragmatic breathing, he or she is engaging the parasympathetic nervous system a lot more. And that has all the cascade of positive effects, from being able to be more calm, sleep better, digest better, be better in general. Obviously, the fight or flight system, the sympathetic system, is something that we need in order to, address cases of high stress or dangerous situations. But it is to be reserved only for these rare occasions, and for as long as we're using it as less as possible, the more of a calm life we're going to live. And so, truly, breathing is one of the very few things that are 100% in our control, that can truly regulate this shift between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And I think Ian is a great example of how, going from a high stressfully breathing to a very relaxing breathing during training can have incredible effects in someone's mental health and sleep, and so on and so forth.
And they just did a study with the apparatus that I use, and the study came out that it lowers, just by doing the respiratory training for a number of minutes, it drops significantly the cortisol level, which was obviously in geared to, because you're breathing deeper into your lungs, into the parasympathetic
Yeah.
system versus the upper chest. So yeah, it's a fantastic tool.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for sharing this incredible story. It was always very interesting to listen to consumers that have gotten real value from the PNOE test and have been able to, ameliorate their lives or their training in some capacity. Any, final comments or things you guys would like to share before we go?
I'm looking forward. Right now, we're Ian and I are going to work on a few tweaks, and even to further improve his running capabilities. Because right now, what's your record on your 5K now?
17:10.
17:10. So it'd be nice to see him break that 17-minute marker. And there's a few things that we're going to do, as in some CO2 tolerance training, and a little bit of altitude training, and yeah, so it's fun working with Ian because he listens to me.
Awesome.
So thanks, Ian, for all your hard work. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again, and we look forward to seeing more incredible results from Ian.
Yes, for sure. 16
Awesome.
minutes. 16 minutes and
60
55
minutes.
seconds.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.